Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just broke down that big game down there in College Station. LSU heads over to Texas A&M for a big time one in the SEC that will decide who is the top team in the SEC moving forward. I do have LSU in that game. I think it's going to be a little bit of a slugfest, a little bit sluggish to start, but I think LSU makes the plays down the stretch to win that game. Incredible one down there and cannot wait for it. But we got a couple other ones that we got to get into real quickly here because Notre Dame Navy is one of those games that I think everyone's looking forward to quite a bit, and I think tons of people are pulling for Navy for obvious reasons. We love the story, and not a lot of people love Notre Dame. I think that's the reality of college football, and Notre Dame is more than fine with that, but no doubt about it, this is an elimination game for the CFP. Whoever loses this game is probably out of the CFP hunt. Maybe Navy has an outside path if they can lose this game and then continue on and win the rest of the way. I don't necessarily see that as a reality, so definitely something to watch there, but definitely a must-win on both sides. They need this one, and if Navy can get it, it would be one of the defining wins of their entire program's history, but this one will be decided on the ground, no doubt about that. I mean, when you look at Notre Dame runs 55% of the time, Navy sits at number 2 in the country, running about 77% of the time. So a lot of run plays in this game, a little bit of a short game, maybe a little bit low scoring, but at the end of the day, it's going to come down to just who can execute that plan the best, who can get that run game going better, who can block up front a little bit more consistently, and more than anything else, who can not miss the assignment that they very much need to make, especially on the Notre Dame side. And it does help when they have athletes just all over the place. They're just absolutely out of this world, all over the place with the athletes on this defense. Xavier Watts is incredible coming down from the third level. You have Jack Kaiser in the middle that's playing really, really good football. You have a number of Jaden Osbury plays great football. Howard Cross and Riley Mills in the middle are absolute nightmares to deal with. So they're going to be more than fine. Now, losing Benjamin Morrison doesn't necessarily help with the setting of the edge in this game, so definitely something to watch. But let's be honest, he wasn't necessarily going to have to cover too much in this game. So that's definitely something to watch as we head into this one. But a couple of players that I'm interested in. Eli Heidenreich is a very important player for what Navy does. He had 201 total yards against Air Force a couple of weeks ago, and he's the leading receiver on this team. He is what they call kind of a outback or a B back, depending on the way you look at it. There's a number of different kind of terminologies for it. Wing back, you can play around with that term, but he's one of those guys that you'll see kind of lined up in sort of a tight end type position, but then he'll kind of go around the edge, he'll catch a pitch, he'll go down the field and catch a wheel route, he'll catch a seam, he'll do a number of different things. Probably the most versatile guy on this team, and he's definitely someone that they're going to need on Saturday just to catch Notre Dame off guard just a couple of times here. And then Deshaun Peel, he's been incredible for this team, and even last week, 2 pick sixes, which is absolutely insane. They might just need one in this game, and if you can get Riley Leonard to make a couple of mistakes, then this thing gets interesting in a hurry. But him, as well as Rayon Lane, that's the name I'm looking for. Rayon Lane are really, really good corners on the back end of that Navy defense, and definitely could bait them into a couple of mistakes throughout this game. But on the other side, Jadarian Price is huge to me in this game. He has 329 rushing yards on the season, is the backup to Jeremiah Love. The big thing here for me is he is the bruiser of these two, and I think when you look at this game overall, Navy is more than capable of keeping up from a schematic perspective or an execution perspective. From a physicality perspective, they're probably not. So I wouldn't necessarily be too surprised if they ran out Jadarian Price for the first 5 plays of this game, ran him right up the middle and said, we're just going to beat you. We're going to bruise you until you quit, and that's going to be the way we go about business. So would not be surprised about that at all. And then on the other side, you got another bruiser that wears number 24. Jack Kaiser is huge for this game for so many different reasons. He's the leader of this defense in a number of different ways, but I believe he is the communicator on this defense, and when you play Navy, communication is the number one thing. You absolutely have to have everyone where they need to be at the snap, and then everyone's got to get to the ball in a hurry because they can get past you and then make you pay, and it will be very, very interesting if those linebackers are not where they're supposed to be, because then you could get a Navy offense that really gets rolling downhill, and that's the last thing that Notre Dame wants to see in this game. But a couple of keys to the game. Can Navy hit that big play? There's no way that Navy's going to be able to win this game just pounding the rock over and over and over again. They're obviously going to do that quite a bit in this game. They have to hit that big pass over the middle of the field, and that's why we talked about Eli Heidenreich. He's going to be hugely important in this game for this purpose, and Blake Horvath, 10 passing touchdowns, 1 INT this year. He's been capable of making that big play downfield. They have to find that opening somewhere, and obviously you're going to have to bait them in to stop the run first and then hit them over top, but at the end of the day, if they can't hit that 150, 60-yard passing touchdown, it's going to be a long day, and definitely one that they're going to have to fight for just about everything that they're getting, so definitely something to watch there. The other thing is you cannot overcommit in the run game. If you overcommit one direction, say there's a pitch outside for Navy, and they're a linebacker for Notre Dame goes a little bit too far outside or tries to make a little bit too aggressive of a angle, they're going to be gone and be past you. And on the other side, you got to deal with Jeremiah Love. If you don't take the right angle on Jeremiah Love, if you overcommit in the run game against him, he is gone, and he is going to tear you to pieces in this game. So it's one of those games where discipline is hugely important for these defenses. Keep your 2 feet on the ground until you absolutely don't have to anymore. Wrap up, make the right play, and then if you can get them on the ground, great. If you have a couple of broken tackles, it's going to be a nightmare day for that defense. And then Notre Dame's defensive approach is fascinating to me. Al Golden's obviously going to have his hands full this weekend, so many different things to worry about, and this Navy offense is not necessarily super easy to get a beat on. They kind of run a weird sling T type offense where you play around with the run as much as you possibly can, but then they can hit those big plays. They can hit the plays over the middle of the field that Xavier Watts is usually incredible at taking away, but you kind of want him in the run game to help out with put an extra body in the box. So it's going to be a fun kind of chess match for him, playing back and forth between, do we want to sell out to stop the run? Do we want to hang back just a little bit, make that one big play on a pass play that we can pick off? There's so many different ways that you can attack this Navy team, and on the other side, there's so many ways that they can counter you. So it's going to be a very interesting kind of chess match between Jeff Monken and Al Golden, and I think Al Golden's absolutely got to win it if they're going to be able to get this one done. I think this one gets a little bit interesting for a little bit. I think Navy has enough fight in them to stay in it early, but at the end of the day, I think Notre Dame's just going to be too much. I think the physicality of this team is a real advantage in this game. I think Jadarian Price is really the difference in this one. I think they run him over and over and over again, and at a certain point, the Navy defenders just can't tackle him anymore. So I would go with Notre Dame in this game. I think it's going to be really interesting, and if Navy wins it, then the entire college football world gets turned on its head, but cannot wait for this one. Definitely going to be a really fun one in MetLife, so definitely something to watch there, but I'm going to pick Notre Dame by a hair. Part of my heart wants to pick Navy, I'll be honest with you, but at the end of the day, I'm going to go with Notre Dame here. And then we got another huge one in the Big Ten over there in Eugene this upcoming weekend. Oregon, kind of just rolling right along. They do have that number 1 next to their name for the first time since 2012, feeling really good about where they're at. A lot of people kind of pegged them as possibly losers last week when they went over to Purdue. They handled business without any question. They're really good, and it's one of those games that you look at it and feels like a lot of people are kind of writing this one off. And I'm not necessarily saying that Oregon shouldn't be massively favored in this game and isn't the better team, but just to say, Illinois played really good football, and they're one of those teams that can make life tough for pretty much any defense they face. And on top of that, they have the ability to kind of slow the game down. And they have the ability, more importantly, to not make mistakes. And that's kind of the biggest thing. Luke Altmaier, 15 touchdowns, only 1 INT on the season. If you can avoid mistakes in this game, slow this game down, make it a little bit mucky, maybe you can have some openings against Oregon that we haven't seen in a couple of weeks. And then on the other side, they're plenty fine taking care of the ball. Dylan Gabriel, 15 touchdowns as well, only 4 interceptions on the year. So Illinois is going to have to make a couple of those plays. They're going to have to make a couple of those 50-50 plays that really kind of come down to, are you going to be able to beat number 1 or not? You know, Vanderbilt was able to make them when they played Alabama. Alabama was able to make them when they played Georgia. So a lot of those teams where you just have to make a couple of those big-time plays in those big games, I think Illinois is going to have to make some plays that are a little bit wonky in this one. And the biggest thing going into this game for me, at least on the injury front, is Caden Fagan is not going to play in this game. He didn't play last week for Illinois, and they kind of had to play around with some stuff. Aiden Autry and Josh McCray were hugely important to that rushing offense, and it's going to be interesting to see just how big of a gap there is between them and Jordan James and Noah Whittington, because as we know, Jordan James becoming one of the better running backs in the entire country, and Noah Whittington can make you hurt at literally any point in the game. So that'll be an interesting thing to watch, and A couple of players to watch. Pat Bryant is the one that I want you guys to keep an eye on, and obviously you should because he's the best player on this Illinois offense, but he's one of those guys that when you play this big-time game, when you play a team that is just outright more talented than you than at pretty much every single position, having a guy that's kind of an equalizer is hugely important, and I think Pat Bryant is that guy. I think when you match him up with Jabbar Muhammad, when you match him up with a lot of these elite corners on the Oregon side, you don't feel bad about that matchup. You feel pretty good about what Pat Bryant can do against a lot of these elite players for Oregon, and that's something they're going to need. A couple of those 50-50 balls that he's so good at going up and getting, they're badly going to need him in this game. And then on the defensive side, Gabe Jackas has been an absolute problem coming off the edge. 2.5 sacks last week. He's been absolutely incredible. And one of those guys that when you play Dillon Gabriel, when you play Oregon, if you can get after this guy, if you can get him on the ground a couple of times and make him think a little bit too much, maybe you can get some of those mistakes that we talked about a second ago. And then Jordan James, we talked about him just a second ago, one of the best running backs in the Big Ten this year, and he's plus 700 yards. Illinois can be run on. Now, I assume they're going to probably try to sell out to stop the run and then live with the consequences on the back end because that back end of the defense is very, very solid. But that being said, Jordan James is a guy that can just make you hurt regardless of how much attention you put towards him, and he's one of those guys that you have to assume that Oregon's going to try to just lean on them, run the ball, play defense, and get out here with a win. He would be at the center of that, obviously. And then you got Derek Harmon on the other side. We talked about Illinois' run game. It is going to be a little bit different without Caden Fagan there, and frankly, if you're Oregon, I think you just outright stop it. I think if you stop that run game, if you put all the pressure on Luke Altmaier, there's going to be mistakes that come. There's almost no way around that with how good this Oregon defense is. So if you're Derek Harmon, if you're a couple of the Jamari Caldwell, another defensive tackle for Oregon, stopping the run is going to be huge. And then if you're Derek Harmon, he can get to the quarterback as well. A really, really athletic defensive tackle that absolutely can cause problems in the pass rush as well as the run defense. And then a couple of the keys to the game, there is a run game gap in this one. When you talk about Jordan James, 100 yards in 3 of the last 4 games, Illinois without Caden Fagan is a little bit running back by committee. It's going to be interesting to see how they handle this. Can they keep up with that running attack for Oregon? Because it's going to be a load to keep up with. And then we talked about it, the 50-50 plays for Illinois. They have to make them, whether that's turnovers, a fumble just bouncing your direction. Illinois has been very good at this. 8 interceptions on the year, plus 7 in the turnover category. And if they can get to Dillon Gabriel, 55 completion percentage under pressure, which isn't all that terrible when you look across the country, but isn't elite by any means. And you could get a couple of those mistakes that you badly need in this game. So when it comes down to it, for Illinois, probably got to be about +2 in the turnover category. This is the way that you're going to be able to do it, is get to Dillon Gabriel and then let your back end make the plays that they've been making pretty much all year. And then how does Oregon handle this top of the mountaintop? Because they have that number 1 next to their name for the first time since 2012. Both Texas and UGA have fallen off that pedestal this season. Can Oregon keep their wits about them in this game against a team that is a really, really solid squad and definitely can give you trouble? I tend to believe so. I think it's just too much for Illinois to deal with, traveling all the way out west, playing a team that's so physical, that's so athletic, that can make those big plays over the downfield. I think it's just going to be too much for Illinois. I really like this Illinois team, but I think the special run does come to an end this weekend. They lose to Oregon, and hopefully they can, get a really good season out of this, but likely their CFP hopes come to an end this upcoming weekend. But incredible couple of games. Cannot wait for both of those. I know Navy is becoming a very popular pick around there, but I do have Notre Dame and I do have Oregon winning those two. A little bit of chalky picks, but can't go against my gut on those two. But we'll stay in the Big Ten for this next segment. We'll get into Washington, Indiana, a huge game without Indiana starting quarterback, and then we'll get into Penn State, Wisconsin. A little bit of a sneaky upset alert over there in Madison this upcoming weekend, so we'll break it down right after this.